A quick bit of housekeeping before we begin. Perry did in fact survive the ordeal she went through on her last adventure with the Doctor, possibly due to Time Lord manipulation. And apparently she saw something in the Warlord that touched her heart, so she ended up becoming his queen on some distant planet. So, happy ending for her. And the Valeyard also survived the explosion of his machine, and he disguised himself as the keeper of the key to the Time Lord Matrix. So we've not seen the last of him. But for now, let's begin the final classic era of Doctor Who and introduce the 7th Doctor, who likes to dress like eccentric professor on holiday, and is played by Carney Sylvester McCoy. We start with another run-in with the Rani. This time she set herself up on a planet of reptile people and booby-trapped the area where she's working with horrible mines that once tripped, encase the victim in a bubble, spins them around in the air, bounces them around whatever surface happens to be there, and then explodes, leaving only a skeleton. And we see the unfortunate results on a young female member of the reptile species. Horrible way to go. Anyway, the Doctor and Mel are forcibly brought down to the planet, and in the ensuing crash land, the Doctor hits his head, and the damage is so severe that it triggers a regeneration. And that's how Sylvester McCoy became the Doctor. Anyway, the Rani has plans which involve various geniuses run throughout Earth's history and the Doctor. Among others, she's captured Hypatia, Pasteur, and Einstein. And she's got a spot for the Doctor. But first, she dupes him into helping her by giving him a bit of amnesia and disguising herself as Mel. And she does a pretty good impression of Mel's voice. Maybe a couple octaves lower, but still pretty good. Although, having to listen to the Doctor prattle on and misspeak various old Earth sayings starts to get on her nerves. Eventually, Mel comes to and hooks up with some of the members of the reptile species who are forced to live a life of pretend leisure in a facility that's basically got a gun to their heads in the form of a hive of poisonous bugs that the Rani can release like that. Also, she has enforcers. Large, multi-eyed bat creatures the size of humans. And they have paralyzing venomous tongues, which are used to great effect on multiple occasions. One of them, who's been elevated to be her personal assistant, named Yorick, takes a special delight in causing pain and suffering in the Rani's name. Although he ends up turning on her when it's revealed that she's using the collected knowledge in a massive biomechanical brain to figure out how to detonate an asteroid which is composed of strange matter, which is stuff you don't want to be messing with, and turn the planet into a time manipulator. She wants to manipulate the timelines of other races and plans to plunge the Earth into the Cretaceous period for some reason. Basically, it'll screw up humanity to the point of non-existence, but it might just give the Silurians and Sea Devils a second chance. Unfortunately, the erasure of humanity can't be allowed, even if it would help the Silurians and Sea Devils. So, the Doctor, with help from the few lizard people who are willing to help, manages to thwart the Rani and prevent the destruction of the planet, which would have killed the lizard people, the humans aboard her facility, because she would wait out the explosion in her TARDIS. And it would also destroy the bat creatures. And Yurik kind of takes that personally. So he leads his people into her TARDIS. So when she's thwarted and the missile fails to hit the asteroid, and she escapes in the TARDIS, the bat creatures chain her up and force her to help them evolve. So we haven't seen the last of her, and we might not have seen the last of the bat creatures. Eventually the Doctor stabilizes, meets up with the real Mel, and dons his new attire, that of an eccentric professor on holiday. After that, the Doctor and Mel look for a fancy space hotel called Paradise Towers, which has an awesome pool. And they find out that it's become a war zone. At some point in the dim and distant past, the adults of Paradise Towers had to evacuate in order to go off and fight a war. My headcanon tells me they were all wiped out by Daleks. And the only people who left behind were caretakers who end up dressing like SS officers for some reason. Their leader even has a small mustache. That's awkward. The very old, a bunch of old ladies, some of whom have turned to cannibalism, actually. And large groups of young girls who've divided into 3 groups: red Kangs, blue Kangs, and yellow Kangs. Although, when we meet them, the last yellow Kang gets carried off by some thing that we later find out is a collection robot, and fed to something that the head caretaker, is keeping as a pet. Only the pet is demanding more and more flesh. And later we find out that the whatever it is actually the disembodied mind of the insane architect of Paradise Towers. See, he loved to build things, but he didn't like people mucking about with his buildings. I mean, the reason buildings exist is to serve people. He's clearly got a screw loose. I mean, without people, there's no need for buildings. But eventually, we find out that the adults had trapped his mind in the basement of Paradise Towers, and the chaos was to find someone who can replace the architect body-wise. And eventually he chooses the head caretaker. And it's up to the Doctor, Mel, some of the surviving, now former cannibal old ladies, and all the surviving blue and red Kangs, not to mention a young man called Pex, who stowed away aboard the escape ship to Paradise Towers in order to avoid fighting the war. who's labeled a coward, but ultimately avails himself by volunteering to help fight and eventually push the possessed caretaker leader himself and a stick of dynamite down a garbage chute where they explode. And the red and blue Kangs honor him by making him a posthumous member, and of course honoring the yellow Kangs, who are now extinct. So, with Paradise Towers finally under new management, the Doctor and Mel bid adieu after showing the Kangs how to use some found coinage in order to activate the still functioning vending machines. So at least the people have a source of food. Oh, and eventually they did find the pool, only it's patrolled by robotic Macra, which nearly kill Mel. But with a little donation of Pex's gun, Mel is able to take it out. Anyway, on to the next adventure. The Doctor and Mel discover a distress signal, which turns out to be false. And instead they end up winning a prize. An all-expense-paid trip to 1959 Disney World. Was Disney World active in 59? I don't remember. I'll have to look it up later. Anyway, they end up, well, Mel ends up on a bus full of aliens dressed in appropriate attire, when in reality they look like purple eyeball creatures. But they're peaceful. And the spaceship actually looks like a bus. So that's a little bit of self-referencing humor later on in the show. Unfortunately, things don't go as planned because they end up hitting a satellite that was launched from Canaveral, and they have to put down in Wales. So the aliens have to spend a couple of days lounging around in a wellness village while they pretend to be a group that the wellness villagers were expecting. Meanwhile, on an alien planet, a woman named Delta just barely manages to survive evacuating her homeworld while being pursued by a group of mercenaries called Bannermen. And their leader, who wants to exterminate the species that Delta belongs to. And she ends up on the same space station that the Doctor and Mel end up on in the first place. She stows away aboard the space bus and ends up on Earth. Eventually, she catches the eye of Billy, a mechanical semi-expert and entertainer, who's the unrequited love interest of a woman named Ray, who actually became something of a mechanic herself just to impress him, although he does not see it. Because he's an idiot! Seriously, she was right there, dude! You could have been dating the whole time! Dingus! But anyway, unfortunately, someone aboard the space bus recognizes her. He's a mercenary who actually is a sociopath who enjoys killing. So, after reporting Miss Delta's position to the Bannermen, he plans to kill the Doctor to get paid extra, and kill Tagalong Ray just for the sheer pleasure of it. Luckily, the Bannermen don't keep their word. The head Bannerman is completely without remorse or scruples or any sense of honor. And he uses the mercenary's tracking beacon to annihilate him just before he was about to kill the Doctor and Ray. So that was lucky. Um, Meanwhile, two American operatives, one guy who sounds like he's from the South, another guy who sounds like he's from Brooklyn, both of them look like they should be in a retirement home, are trying to track the satellite that the space bus crashed into. Eventually they find it, thanks to the doctor. But for now, they're captured by the Bannermen and menaced into giving up information. Now, these Bannermen, they kill without mercy or thought. They even killed the guy that sent the doctor and Mel on that space bus tour, even though he helped them. But then again, he also killed the mercenary who was helping them, so he couldn't collect on a bounty. So there you go. Eventually, it's revealed that an artifact that the princess Delta was carrying was an egg. Inside is a young female of her species who, as a defense mechanism, can generate sonic screams and grows very, very quickly thanks to a special fluid that the other princess, Delta, keeps with her. Although, because Billy's taken a shine to her, he steals some of the fluid and drinks it in order to transform into a member of her species. And that was a serious risk. It could have killed him. Luckily it didn't. Although this puts the kibosh on any potential romance that Ray could have had with him. But then again, the adult princess kind of took a shine to Billy, so there you go. Meanwhile, sadly, right when the space bus gets fully repaired and the aliens are ready to leave Earth, the Bannermen show up and annihilate all of them. Mel's the only survivor, along with the princess, of course. And the Bannermen even take Mel hostage in exchange for giving up the two members of giving up Delta and the kid. While the doctor flies his flag of truce to try and negotiate, the Bannermen shoot at him. Excuse me. Excuse me, sorry. And when the doctor applies reasoning and appealing to one's better nature, and even bluster, the Bannerman leader sees through it all. He is a completely irredeemable monster. He's seen chewing on a piece of meat, and loath to think what it was. And he refuses to be civilized. All he wants is to exterminate Delta's species. And while he is slowed down when a booby trap involving honey and a honeycomb, or a hive, I should say, does slow the group down. They have to make a last stand at the facility that has now been abandoned by the humans who were there, the staff, who thankfully managed to get away. I think. I'm not entirely sure whether or not there were two buses and the space bus is the one that blew up only or not. I think the humans got away. I'm not sure. But I will say this. The doctor and Billy do manage to rig up the facility's sound system in order to utilize the young princess's sonic scream to great advantage. The Bannermen are powerless against it. And the Bannerman leader's own booby trap of the TARDIS comes back to bite him because he steps into it and is vaporized. And without him, the rest are quickly rounded up and presumably get taken into custody by UNIT, but we don't see them this episode. And so, oh wait, scratch that. They don't get taken by UNIT. They get taken aboard their own spacecraft as prisoners. And the two princesses and the now transformed Billy fly off to help restore Delta's homeworld. And Ray gets gifted Billy's motorcycle. So all's well that ends well. And finally, the Doctor and Ace travel to an ice world in search of a dragon. Yep, an actual dragon. Although, when it's revealed, it looks more like a different kind of xenomorph. And it turns out to be a cyborg with an incredibly strong power source. Unfortunately, the planet is in the grips of a tyrant named Kane. He can only survive in sub-freezing temperatures, and his touch kills almost instantly by cold. He also likes to enslave people when they're very young by tricking them into taking a seemingly innocuous gold coin which burns his mark into their hands. One woman who realizes that she's probably not going to be his favorite for much longer now that he's noticed some of the younger females aboard the colony facility on Iceworld. So she plans to steal a ship, but unfortunately fails and ultimately is killed. But her character exists pretty much to add more fuel to the fire that is the hatred the viewer has for this Kane character. I mean, seriously, even a Dalek wouldn't be this evil. Okay, maybe a Dalek, but definitely not a Cyberman. Anyway, who should they run into, the Doctor and Mel, but Glitz from back in the previous season. It seems he's lost all his money gambling, and so he's about to lose his ship, the Nosferatu, if he doesn't come up with the money like that. So he's on the hunt for a treasure that the dragon is supposedly guarding somewhere in the bowels of Iceworld. Eventually they find the dragon, and they find out that what the treasure isn't gold or platinum or even raw materials like Zyton 7, but rather it's a power crystal that the dragon carries inside its head. Unfortunately, the dragon is killed and the crystal is taken. But before Blitz can cash in on it, Kane orders his army, which consists of slaves and mercenaries who were tricked into signing up with Kane, who used to be on Glitz's crew. He tells them all to, Kane tells them all to chase everyone out of the facility and into the Nosferatu. which is very suspicious. The only two people to miss the bus are a mother and her young daughter, whom the monster actually helps get back to the main facility after the kid stumbles into Kane's private chamber. And it's a good thing they missed the bus, because both they and Glitz end up witnessing the Nosferatu, after it takes off, exploding, killing everyone aboard. But before that happens, the Doctor and Mel meet up with the unlikeliest of characters. A young woman by the name of Ace, although her real name is Dorothy, which she hates because who would name their kid Dorothy? Oh, I don't know, the parents of the most famous Dorothy from the Wizard of Oz stories. And Dodo, her name was technically Dorothy, or Dorothea. And I don't see what her problem is. Dorothy's a fine name. I got a couple Dorothys in my family. But at first she comes off as kind of obnoxious. She's obsessed with explosives. She created something called Nitro 9. Supposedly it has more wallop than regular nitro, and it measures 9 on the Richter scale. Yeah, she'd be very popular in this day and age. Can you say Unabomber? But when we see her, she's working as a waitress in the colony facilities cafe. And when the lady from before, well, yet to come, I should say, when she complains that her milkshake is too lumpy, she mouths off to the lady and dumps the milkshake on her head. So, when she's obviously fired, she ends up dumping another milkshake on her former employer's head. Yeah, it's not painting her in the best light, although she does sort of grow on you eventually. She helps the Doctor, she helps Mel, and she very nearly avoids becoming another one of Kane's slaves, who, after she clears an ice jam in one of the doorways with her Nitro 9, offers to make her a mercenary, to let her explore the 12 galaxies. Obviously it's a ruse, and once she touches this coin of his, she's his property. Luckily, she's not that easy to manipulate. And she also befriends Mel. And together, Glitz, the Doctor, Mel, and Ace eventually end up having to hand over the crystal power source to Kane, because he ended up threatening Ace. So now he can utilize the colony, which is actually a massive spaceship, to exact revenge on his people. See, 3 millennia ago, he and his girlfriend were heads of a criminal empire. But when the authorities finally tracked them down, the girlfriend offed herself, and the guy was exiled to Iceworld, where he was able to survive. Unfortunately, they insisted on making his jailer a cybernetic dragon, which would need an incredible power source just to keep going. And so they basically gave Kane a single jailer who had the key to his freedom the whole time. Yep, that's what the creature really was. But then the Doctor pulls a wild card. He realized from some star charts in one of the caves below the facility, it was revealed that 1,000 years after Kane's exile, his planet's sun went supernova and annihilated everyone he wanted to get revenge on. So for 2,000 years, there was no one to kill. And he never knew that. And in a fit of frustration, he exposes himself to unfiltered sunlight, which makes him look like he looked into the Ark of the Covenant, like that. And so the last of Cain's race fades into history, and only the Doctor remembers. Meanwhile, Glitz, the little girl, and her mom have christened the spaceship the Nosferatu 2, though personally I would have called it the Nosferatu 2, with a 2 instead of, you know what I mean. And Glitz offers to take the lady and her daughter home, and Mel decides to go with Glitz, see a few more sights before going back to Earth. But yeah, this is the end for her. She bids a tearful goodbye to the Doctor, which is a little more emotional than her actual first meeting with the Doctor, which we never see. We just see the third Doctor with Mel. So that's a bit of a consolation. But instead of going with Mel, Glitz, the lady, and her daughter, Ace is offered a chance to see the 12 galaxies before going back to her home world. So it turns out she's from Earth, and after getting kicked out of school for experimenting with explosives, one day she was experimenting and lamenting why she can't be somewhere else, because she really didn't like being on Earth. She never knew her real parents, and she never liked her adopted parents, although there's no evidence to suggest that they were bad people so far. But then somehow a time storm took her to Iceworld, so she had to get a job. Well, another job, because she also made money as a waitress on Earth. And I have to wonder whether or not she mouthed off to people there, too. She would not survive the food service industry where I work. Anyway, with that, the first season of the final era of classic Doctor Who comes to an end. When next we meet, we encounter some old foes and some new foes, and hopefully more of Ace's story is revealed. Until then, this is Mr. J signing out and reminding you, umbrellas with question marks for handles are cool. And Mel was actually a better character than I thought. And let's hope Ace improves as well. Excelsior.